You know what happens when you don't come back to your YouTube channel in over a year? You turn into a pumpkin.
I actually wanted to turn myself into a pumpkin last year after I saw this and thought, but I didn't have time, so I just... What exactly kept me busy in the last 622 days? Oh, you know, I moved. My husband and I made a feature-length film in our garage. I sewed a couple things. I lost my phone. I learned how to do this. And I bought this very large piece of brown corduroy fabric online thinking it was pumpkin colored. It's not. And then I bought this large piece of yellow corduroy, same thing, and it turned out I needed to wait a whole year to actually see that and then order the corduroy labeled pumpkin orange. And then a couple weeks ago, I cut out half a donut for the front of the skirt and 2 quarter donuts for the back with this little appendage wing thing. When it grows up, it's gonna be a pocket. I also cut out 2 trapezoids, 2 more trapezoids, these wedges, and then tore several strips that ended up being both too narrow and too short for what I needed. Because I can do math, but I can't do it quickly after 10 p.m. when I only slept for 4 hours the night before. It's a long story? No, actually, it's a pretty short story, but we're not gonna tell it now. I could tell you what those strips were supposed to be, but we'll just call them what they are. Still sitting on my floor 3 weeks later because I haven't quite convinced myself that they're useless enough to throw away. I put all the skirt pieces together into a whole donut, made only slightly more complicated by the not quite yet pockets. I could explain, but I think it would be easier if you just watch. Yep, I was right. That was much easier for me. At this point, the skirt was commandeered for a greater purpose, so while my cat was living his best life, I tried to top stitch the pocket openings. And decided we'd all be happier if I just didn't. Instead, I cut 2 jack-o'-lantern eyes and a mouth out of some black corduroy. I carefully pinned all 3 to the front apron piece and hand-stitched them all down. Not in a good way or a permanent way, just in a seize control and make sure they don't budge kind of way. That took about half an hour, and my cat was still asleep, so don't really know how long a cat nap is supposed to take. I did a couple stitch tests with some scrap fabric to make sure I knew exactly what kind of zigzags I needed to attach the face. When I was 90% happy, I made one last adjustment and, okay, so my cat did choose this exact moment to relinquish control of the skirt, but I was in a very particular groove and I didn't want to have to remember my machine settings or write down my settings or change my thread, so I just carried on. I stitched around every edge with a tight zigzag, being extra careful at every corner, dip, and curve, which was exactly all of it. Then I cut out all my big hand stitches and trimmed all my threads. And if you think you saw a fluffy tail appear somewhere in the middle of all that, then you know exactly what happened next. I took those strips I tore earlier and pinned them right sides together in an attempt to make my dress straps. I sewed down both sides, trimmed away the extra fabric, and then tried, with every single trick, bewitchment, and conjuration up my sleeve, to turn them right side out. Let me tell you something quite foreseeable that I'm learning right before your eyes. Corduroy is very difficult to turn right side out if you make it into a thin strap. First of all, it's just a thick fabric, not the kind that loves to be a contortionist. Second, it's got these pretty pinstripes with a velvety texture, and that makes them grippy, the opposite of slidey, the opposite of helpful. I spent 40 minutes trying to turn this one 15-inch piece, and inventing new curses, and through a level of persistence that might no longer be a virtue, I did succeed, but I refused to do it twice. So I moved my cat. After finishing the pockets, I pinned on the front of the front waistband. There will be a back of the front of the back, and back of the back, so if you get confused, just remember that Molly's very extravagant mother just sent us 90 parakeets. I'm sure that will help with something. I sewed on the front of the back waistband almost the same way. I left these little extra tabs on either end of the front, and I didn't do that on the front of the back. Why are those necessary? They're not. Then I cut and sewed myself some slightly wider straps so I could make this little face sandwich. I sewed up one side of the sandwich, across the top, and down the other side, leaving the bottom open so that I could grab the now very helpful straps and turn the whole thing right side out. Then I could flatten it nicely, perfect the corners, and top stitch up one side, across the top, and down the other to hold it all in place. And now a brief pause brought to you by that magical moment your project starts to look real. I folded the apron in half to find the exact middle and pinned it to the exact middle of the front waistband, upside down, so that when you flip it, the face will... Yeah, I checked that about 20 times before I sewed it. Then I took the back of the front waistband and stacked it right on top so that the apron was surrounded on both sides and had no chance of escaping. I sewed all the way around the tabs and across the top, but again, left the bottom open. I clipped the corners of the tabs, turned them right side out,
turned them right side out, turned them right side out,
turned the rest of it right side out, tucked all of the raw edges inside, and stitched the back of the front waistband to the inside so everything was sealed up tight. Then I top stitched all around the waistband, which there was an easy way to load this into my machine and a forethought is not your forte way to do it. We all know what happened. The only pieces left to attach were those other trapezoids, one of which got pinned to the front of the back waistband and basted in place because I needed to be able to rip it back off in a second. I pinned the straps to the top corners and tried it on once, twice, maybe 3 times, until I had adjusted the straps to a length that I liked. Then I cut off all the extras, seam ripped the back trapezoid, and made yet another little sandwich just like the front, although this one looked more like a hot pocket. Then I just kept retracing all my steps. So up, over, and down, trim all the corners, turn it inside out, find the exact center, pin, 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 stack the back of the back waistband, so, get very excited at unknowingly winning a game of thread chicken when the bobbin magically ran out right at the end of the seam, and I only noticed because there was no thread to cut to get it out of my machine, so it was literally perfect and was caught on camera, and now I feel like the Stitch Witch, or the Weave Wizard, or the Fibermancer. Okay, that didn't happen the first time around. Trim the corners, turn the waistband right side out, fold the raw edges in, stitch it all up with your familiar help. Top stitch like forethought is still not your forte, but thank goodness for afterthought. But then it did take a weirdly long time to figure out how to get it out of the machine. Since I had run out of pieces to attach, I decided to cut some more. Specifically, a comedically large number of orange noodles cut on the bias so they'll be as stretchy as possible. And when I had enough, I sewed them all together into one comedically long noodle. And then I used it to hem the skirt. Circle skirts are notoriously difficult to hem smoothly because folding up the hem requires you to fold a larger amount of fabric into a smaller amount of fabric, which can cause bubbling and accidental corners, and just other wonkiness where wonkiness is unwelcome. It's even worse if your fabric is bulky, and I'd had just about enough of corduroy getting an attitude with me on this project, so I ensorcelled it with bias tape. I pinned the noodle all the way around the bottom of the hem, stretching it just a little bit as I went so that when I sewed it on and folded it up toward the inside, it could shrink back down smoothly, and from the outside, you'd never know it was there. Now, if I'm making this all sound a little too easy, it kind of was. I should tell you the story of the sewing room poltergeist. Right, the only thing left to do was to add a buttonhole on each of the waistband tabs, and, well, I debated for kind of a long time about exactly what kind of button to use, because in another episode of No Forethought Here, I hadn't bought anything specifically for this project. I asked the experts, and then I didn't listen to them. Who did you think you were talking to?